Tonight's show, white man beaten by black mob and Michael Brown revenge attack.
Live from the room of Mirror Studio, you're listening to Foster Brothers on Point. Turn your selector switch to the fire position. The show is now live. I'm Hayes Foster. My brother Stephen Foster is here with me. We're the Foster Brothers. We're your hosts for the radio show. Tonight we're going to talk about like Stephen mentioned, the Michael Brown revenge beating at a Waffle House in Mississippi. And, unfortunately, racial tensions seem to be very high right now, especially after what happened in Ferguson, Missouri. And we're covering this because I haven't heard any mainstream coverage on this story, and it's very it's a sad situation that this kind of thing is still going on. First off, Ferguson, you had some fake protesters out there. There were really rioters in disguise, some opportunists. I really don't see what going in and stealing Air Jordans has to do with revenge for Michael Brown's death. Taking rims and tires, that has nothing to do with justice. That has to do with opportunistic looting. And that just shows the mentality of some of these fake protesters that were in Ferguson, Missouri. Stephen?
Yeah, we're seeing what I would consider social engineering occurring. The news is intentionally baiting certain demographics into having an opinion and what the way they should feel. They're deploying, government assets like Al Sharpton. They're using all the tools. We know who the players are in the game, and they're being utilized. Now, it's not to say that this incident didn't occur naturally, but what we are suggesting is that the powers to be and the mainstream media are pushing certain agendas to either escalate situations or to further deteriorate race relationships in the United States, and I don't like that at all.
I don't either. Let's look at some of the facts surrounding what happened here. And I pulled this off of Infowars.com. White Marine beaten by black mob and Michael Brown revenge attack. And I'm just going to hit some of the highlights here. Apparently this happened it began at the West Point Waffle House in Mississippi on last Saturday morning around 1 a.m. in the morning. Sounds like Ralph Weems was already inside the restaurant, and his friend David Knighton was walking up to the restaurant, and someone outside the door said, this place is not safe for whites. So, you have to put yourself in that situation. You're just out, trying to get, a sandwich or a waffle, and you're walking up to the door and someone says, this place isn't friendly for whites. Or, if you're black, you can say, someone says this place isn't friendly for blacks or Asian. Just plug in your ethnicity. That's kind of shocking within itself. I can't say that I've ever gone out to eat and before I even walked in the restaurant, they say it's not safe for, my particular ethnicity. It just sounds totally ridiculous, Stephen.
I've never experienced that. Now, I've been in areas where, I felt a little racially out of place, but I've never been scared for my life, and I've always, probably never backed away because there was a certain race that was predominant in the restaurant. Now, this definitely is kind of it's not new what's occurring because we also, are well aware of the knockout game. This is a phenomenon that's occurring hugely popular in Chicago, a place where until recently they didn't allow carry permits. So we've seen racially motivated attacks in the most recent, past 5 to 10 years. It's kind of black on white or black aggression towards white attacks that we've been seeing, and this is just a fact.
So back to the this revenge attack, the Michael Brown revenge attack. So apparently, Mr. Knighton entered the restaurant anyway, and he sees his friend, 32-year-old Iraqi war veteran Weems, already in a heated discussion with a group of black men. At that point, the article says the police were called. Knighton and Weems left and headed for a Huddle House restaurant on the way to Weems' house. Well, they arrive at the Huddle House parking lot, and they were followed by a mob of approximately 20 men. Well, Knighton exited the restroom after they were already in, and he sees his buddy, Mr. Weems, surrounded. A security guard asks everyone to leave, and that's kind of a weird part of the story. I have no idea why. I don't know if that means he asked everyone in the restaurant to leave, or if just the group that was harassing Mr. Weems. It's not really clear. At any rate, and I don't know why the security guard. A lot of these security guards are off-duty cops, and they are armed. So I don't know why this was allowed to escalate the way it did. So what happened is the Knighton was blocked from getting out of the restroom. So basically, I guess they're about to attack his friend. So he probably halfway came out. Someone sees him coming out, and they push the door back closed to keep him from getting out. That's what happens when you have a mob of people. You just kind of control the situation. And so he's basically, when he did get out, he sees his friend, Mr. Weems, on the ground getting beaten. And Knightley, who served in the Air Force in Afghanistan, was also attacked, suffering broken bones to his face, a blood clot in his right eye, cut over his left eye. While Weems was being beaten, Knightley heard racial slurs being yelled by the crowd. So apparently it's just, basically chaos and out of control. Now, everyone's, in my mind, I'm still trying to figure out why the security guard, I don't, at that point, that's not really being a security guard. It doesn't say what he did. He may have just left the restaurant. Maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe he didn't want to get involved. But
well, at a certain point, he might have been outnumbered, and if his security guard agency didn't allow him to carry a gun, he might have just known his odds and just bailed.
It's very possible. So, what came of it? The police eventually arrived around 2 a.m. Weems received life-threatening injuries and had to be put in a medically induced coma following brain surgery at North Mississippi Medical Center. So that's where we're at today in America. Looks like a tragedy happens, and that's an excuse to go rob, burn down stores, and beat up an ethnicity that you may have a false sense of animosity towards for whatever reason. Something that happened in your childhood or teenage years or whenever it happened. You think that whole race is corrupt, so you're just going to beat them up. Sounds like some animalistic thinking there. Social engineering at its finest. Good job.
And what we have to realize is there's people where they send out the fake Reverend Al Sharpton out, and he gets everyone riled up, and he starts talking race and how there's inequality. I remember the first few days of the Ferguson riots, there was no race stuff. In fact, it seemed like there was a unity between all races. And towards later on, which of course Ferguson's died down a little bit now, but after a couple of days, the white people that were supporting them kind of faded out because they began to face aggression towards from black people. And what happens is when Al Sharpton comes out there and says it's a race issue, I don't think it's a race issue. If you're a big man and you come and you start punching a police officer and sucker punch him while he's sitting in his car, and he pulls a gun on you, instead of surrendering, you run at him, you can't expect much else but getting shot. It's not a race issue. That would happen across all racial barriers. So Al Sharpton, he's about 58 years old right now, or 59. This man is well known for his interactions as a informant. He's worked with alphabet agencies in the past as a snitch.
Oh yeah, he was an FBI informant back late '70s.
He does all sorts of. He has a radio show. He does commentary on MSNBC. His net worth is in the millions. I think currently he's about $5 million. He's dating a girl in her 30s.
Stephen, you touched on something interesting, about Michael Brown, and the latest story, or the latest information is that, when the policeman pulled up and saw Michael Brown and his friend walking in the street, he pulled up beside him and asked him to, get on the sidewalk. The officer claims he didn't even know that they were under suspect for, strong arm robbery, sorry. And the thing of it is, I remember growing up, me and Steven, we'd be with our friends skateboarding, at different places. And sometimes the cops would show up, and, sometimes the conversation would get heated. And I can tell you that I never considered punching the officer through his own window, because I knew there'd be very serious consequences to that. So just keep that in perspective when you think about the Michael Brown situation.
There's a lot that the news doesn't want to point out. I do want to give a shout out to some of our followers. We got a Flycatch in our blog. I want to give a shout out to him, and we appreciate you listening to us tonight.
Yeah, all you guys listening to the show, we do appreciate you tuning in. We're trying to, get information that's not being covered on a lot of the larger media outlets to the ears of Americans. So, we've got this beating situation that happened in Mississippi. Obviously, here's what worries me, Stephen. Let's say, there's another, situation where a group of people are mad about the Michael Brown violence, and they decide they're going to, attack somebody for whatever reason. He's the wrong color, you can't eat here. Sounds reminiscent to the civil rights days, doesn't it? Interesting. So, and first off, this is America. Everybody is not unarmed civilians. Just FYI. If anybody's out there thinking that, everybody's, and veterans, I don't know what the numbers are. Some veterans I know carry, some don't. It just depends. And that's like any other civilian. I'd hate to think of a situation where, a mob shows up and, picks a fight with someone with a carry permit, or just someone carrying a weapon. The problem is, what does a Glock, 19 or 17 hold? You got 16 rounds plus one in the chamber, 17 shots. I'm just saying, let's not let this turn into a bloodbath, America, because I don't think anybody wants violence on any side of this. And also, violence breeds violence. Just keep that in mind. So when you decide to commit violence on somebody, don't be surprised if they commit it right back at you. And like Stephen mentioned earlier, the knockout game, that seemed to just crop up right after Zimmerman didn't get convicted in the Trayvon Martin shooting. And, the people lost their life in this knockout game. And let me tell you what, it could turn out to a shootout game very quickly. Just keep that in mind before, hopefully before someone goes out and just commits random violence just because, whatever excuse they're given, whatever excuse they've got.
You need to look at history, and, there were some great strides for the black race and for black Americans. When we had Martin Luther King organize the marches, the sit-ins, the rallies, he was a nonviolent, peaceful activist, and what we need to see is more of that. I think Ferguson kind of started off like that. There was some burning of buildings, but there was also groups that wanted to do it the right way. You send in your CIA or, I mean, your FBI agents, Al Sharpton,
Provocateurs.
and he gets everyone agitated. And next thing you know, they're throwing Molotov cocktails. The police have to escalate it and start shooting rubber bullets at the protesters. It makes everyone madder, and it just gets escalated too quickly, and it's all kind of government run. And I think that most people that read a little bit more than the average can see straight through this. For us, it's obvious, and for a lot of people, this is obvious that they want the tension, they need the tension. It's the whole divide and conquer.
You mean most people that can read, probably. So yeah, I tell you what, we're gonna go ahead and go to our sponsor. Foster Brothers on Point would like to thank MyOneSupply.com for making this show possible. MyOneSupply.com, supplier of fine firearm and tactical gear. MyOneSupply.com carries Magpul, Eberly Stock, Trigicon, Troy Industries, and many more top-shelf brands. MyOneSupply.com offers genuine military surplus and survival items. From the battlefield to your front door, check out MyOneSupply.com. And for a limited time, enter promo code TACZONE, TACZONE, for 10% off of any one item at checkout.
So Hayes, we were just on the forums here, and Flycatch sent us an article from Business Insider, and it says, here's the law that might protect the Missouri cop who shot the unarmed team. Now, as you read through the article, you realize that there's actually legislation in the Missouri books that could protect this officer. And before I even read this article, I was already thinking that just the powers to be would like to see this cop get off, because that would agitate the system, or that would agitate certain activists even further and escalate the situation. So basically, what they're saying is, if Darren Wilson, who who might be charged or is charged in Brown's death, the attorneys could invoke this law to argue that if he believed that his life was endangered, then he would be spared. As a police officer, if you think your life's endangered, then that's your free ticket to shoot someone if you're a cop. So it's pretty likely that any way this goes down, he's probably going to get off, especially with this law being on the books.
But now, the officer, Darren Wilson, has not been charged yet. Am I correct in that? That's the latest.
Yeah, that's a big if.
Okay, that's what I thought. I knew that he hadn't been charged at this point, which that could happen, any day at this point. I know that, there's information being heard right now by the jury. My thoughts on it, Stephen, I think we know where we're at today, in the world, and knowing the hour in which we live, we have to understand and take into account that a lot of these people, these globalists, America has always been hated because of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the prosperity that this country's had in the past and continues to have. It could be more, but there's, unfortunately, laws are in place now to kind of shut the door on the small people. Most laws are being written by large corporations at this point. But that aside, it still is a land of opportunity. Why do you think you've got people swarming over the southern border, people flying into, Mexico just so they can sneak over the southern border, people flowing in from Central America, and some of the Central America thing is staged. As far as they claim that a lot of them were children. If you're 35 years old, you're not a child at this point. But it still is a great country. Is it perfect? No, it's never been perfect. Even from the founding fathers, when they came up with the idea of the country, it wasn't perfect. It was always an idea, but you want to strive for that perfection. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of strides in the right direction as far as personal liberty. It's more like we're at a point where people want to worship government. Large corporations, materialism has crept in. Um, this country was great when there were, good moral ideas that were still in place. It's almost like we're kind of in this vulture situation. We're kind of picking up the scraps from these globalist companies at this point, and giving scraps on whatever entitlement program you can get on. So a lot of these politicians can stay in office. It's kind of an embarrassment from what it was at one point.
Speaking of what it was at one point, Hayes, the co-host here, and we were discussing earlier in pre-show that, what's the definition of the Second Amendment? And there's a little point that we discuss frequently, but we don't very often hear other hosts talking about. So how do you define the Second Amendment, and what are they actually trying to prove here? One thing that we frequently say is the Second Amendment is basically to prevent a tyrannical government from taking over. And if it does take over, the people, the governed people, the masses have that option to kick out the government
that's in place and hit the reset button.
Now, how do you do that? Well, when the Constitution and the Second Amendment was originally written, they discussed, the right to bear arms. Now, that was basically a reference to your firearm. And at that point, that was the most sophisticated military weapon available.
The musket, yeah.
The musket. So they were basically saying the citizens should have
access to military-grade weaponry.
Exactly.
Now think about where we're at right now, August 28, 2014. That makes a lot of people nervous. Now, why would it make you nervous? Does freedom make you nervous? Freedom's an idea. But does it make you nervous that civilians would have military grade weaponry? I think some people it does, but that also tells you where we're at as a nation, the United States, with morality. We've fallen. We're still falling at this point.
I just think that when it's discussed, the right to bear arms, or people say that the Constitution's irrelevant, I think that, the patriots and the people that can read and have an IQ of higher than 50 should speak up and say, hey, the Second Amendment actually means not just the right to bear arms, but the ability to take over a tyrannical government. If a tyrannical government has, tanks and
armored
vehicles, armored vests, advanced technologies.
Oh, wait. You just touched on the armored vest. There is legislation on a federal level right now trying to ban body armor for civilians. So anybody out there has kind of been on the fence thinking about picking up a vest or something, I'd go ahead and do so right now, because that is definitely that's in the crosshairs right now. And I tell you what, there's one thing I'm surprised it's not banned, and I recommend picking up that too. Would be a good set of night vision optics. Probably a PVS 14 would be a good starting place, depending on what your budget is. Yeah, you're going to spend a little cash, but looks like we're in some very interesting times, folks.
They're moving forward. Obama's talking about signing some, United Nations treaties without the Congress approval. This is environmental issues that he's wanting to do, some greenhouse gas initiatives that would technically require the Congress to sign off on and vote on. He's going to bypass that. He's kind of a little bit rogue at this point. I think that a lot of people have said that there's plenty of ways to impeach him, or there's things he's done to impeach him. The Republican Party is so political, and if you guys have ever been in politics, it's a dirty game. But I think they're holding out till after the elections coming up in this coming November. I would expect after November to expect impeachments to be brought against him, but he's probably going to start doing some stuff pretty radical up until that point.
Yeah, it's overwhelmed the system to overthrow the system, and it's worked in the past in other countries, and why wouldn't it work in America? It's just we're in such dangerous times right now that Everyone should be on guard. Everyone should, be preparing for things that could come to pass. And I hear from people all the time. They say, well, what if nothing happens and I got all this storable food? Well, guess what? Eat it. Well, what if nothing happens and I got all these rifles and ammo? Well, guess what? Go out and shoot it. You might enjoy it. Okay? So, I'm getting tired of hearing that angle on everything. Just be prepared, okay? It's part of what your job is as a citizen. Be prepared, be informed. Don't stop reading. Turn off the evening news. Read a book. Read about something you're interested in. It doesn't have to be political, just whatever you like, okay? Just read a book.
Just become educated, because the more information you have, the better you can fight this war on information. Because we clearly are in an information war. This is an age to where there's battles being fought physically. There's the physical realm. There's the intellectual realm. There's the information realm.
There's a spiritual realm.
And there's a spiritual realm. And if you can't feel the spiritual realm, you need to wake up, because it's real.
And a lot of things that happen in the spiritual realm affect this physical realm, and they spill over. So, something recently that's been weighing on my mind is the fact that, and I didn't even want to go in this direction. We'll maybe cover this on another show. Is it seems like possibly radical Islam is a form of Satanism, because everything that Satanism is and that it embraces is what radical Islam embraces. So just keep that in mind. The death cult. That's what they are. They behead people. They take over, countries, and say, we're putting the Islamic State in. You better bow down. We're going to tear your crosses off. That is Satanism, okay? The vehicle is Islam. Keep that in mind.
And it's a shame that, that's the reality, because for a lot of Christians, if a Christian truly believes that Islam is Satanism, you could almost see another holy war coming. And there's been so much wars, and we just don't need any more wars. But you almost think that can be the premise for a third world war, or just for more violence. And I hate to see that.
No one wants to see it. Violence breeds violence. But it always has.
Hayes and I, we've been reading and paying attention to stuff probably since the 90s, and it always seems like there's a little bit of nugget that comes forward that you realize, I didn't realize that 9/11, September 11th, that was potentially an inside job, or our government potentially had done it, or
they potentially knew about it, but elements allowed it to happen.
Or that governments in the past have staged false events. Germany, provocateered events against Poland to start wars. The Gulf of Tonkin, the Bay of Pigs, the crisis with Cuba. There's always been these events where a government has created a false scenario, or maybe they sunk their own ship in order to create an agenda if they're trying to come after a nation. You begin to realize this stuff, and then you learn a little bit more, and you realize how deep it goes, and you realize that there's a small elite group controlling things. You realize Barack Obama isn't really the president; he's a puppet. He's just someone that reads a teleprompter for the rich people that control him. And I think that just realizing that the Islam could potentially be Satanism is the most recent thing that Hayes and I have been talking about. This is kind of like the new nugget of information that we think's coming out, and it really sucks that we're thinking this, because this could mean more wars.
Yeah, it could also mean unrest. And if you're on the fence about that statement that we both made about Islam being a form of Satanism or a vehicle for Satanism, just remember, how many times have you seen someone from a Methodist or Baptist church, or Church of Christ for that matter, behead anybody? Just keep that in mind. So we're going to wind down the show. Everybody out there, let's keep the violence non-violent. Let's just not participate. And God bless everybody for listening. And we'll see you next week. Thanks.